I borrowed money from you, Mom. I thought it was an international call, but it turned out to be from my son. When I asked how much he spent, it seems he extravagantly used up to $40,000. But I was sure I didn't have that kind of money. What? Did you check the account name? At that moment, my son screamed over the phone. I am Penelope, 60 years old, a mother of 2, approaching my 60th birthday this year. My eldest son is Michael, and my younger son is Matthew. My husband passed away suddenly, and I usually spend my days alone. Michael, my eldest, should be turning 31 this year. He was always a troublemaker, and at 23 he left home. He took all the money my husband and I had saved, which infuriated my husband, leading to Michael being disowned. Since then, Michael has vanished without a trace. No idea where he is or what he's doing. My younger son, Matthew, is 29. He's the exact opposite of his brother, sincere and honest. Actually, he recently asked if we could live together, so we started sharing a home. When deciding to move in together, I asked Matthew's wife, Natalie, "Isn't it cramped living in your in-laws' house?" But she reassured me with a smile that it wasn't a problem, so I've been living comfortably. Matthew and his family are both working. They have a young child, just 4 years old, so as a grandmother, I try my best to support them. This has helped me build a good relationship with Matthew and Natalie. Above all, seeing my grandchild every day makes me feel incredibly blessed. Then one day, while I was relaxing at home with my grandchild, who I had just picked up from kindergarten, the doorbell rang. It was early afternoon, and Matthew and Natalie should be at work. Wondering who it could be, I told my grandchild to wait in the room and hurried to the front door. "Yes?" I answered lightly and opened the door, only to find a slightly aged Michael standing there. As I stood there frozen in surprise, Michael looked at me with a warm smile. "Michael, where have you been all this time?" I asked in a hoarse voice, and Michael, looking remorseful, apologized to me. He seemed more mature and composed, no longer having the sharp edge he used to. Standing next to Michael was a charming young girl, smiling sweetly. "Actually, I'm planning to get married, and I came to introduce her," Michael said, looking at me as if gauging my reaction. Tears welled up in my eyes as I felt proud of how much Michael had grown. I immediately invited them in and laid out coffee for the two. Michael quickly realized the child was his brother's and waved to my grandchild with a smile. "My name is Aurora, and I'm 24 years old. I just graduated from college." Aurora introduced herself. I was impressed that Michael was marrying such a young woman. As we chatted, Michael suddenly brought up something unexpected. "Actually, we don't have a house right now. We used to live in a different area, not here, but decided to move back when we got married, so we sold our house and came here. But the apartment we plan to rent is still under construction, we were told." With a gloomy face, Michael and Aurora lamented. "We were deceived." They had given all their savings for the rent to someone there, and now were left with no money, they said with downtrodden faces. I felt sympathy for them and looked distressed. "We'd like to stay here for a while, if that's okay." Even though he's a wayward son, as a parent, I wanted to help. But my younger son Matthew is living here. I told Michael that I couldn't decide this alone, and he pleaded with me to contact his brother. Prompted by Michael, I called Matthew. After explaining the situation and telling him about Michael's return, Matthew hesitated for a moment, but then agreed to let them stay for a while. Natalie would be informed by Matthew himself. When I told Michael, he repeatedly thanked me with a bright smile, and then left the house saying he had parked nearby. When he returned, he only had a carry-on bag and a Boston bag, nothing else. "You've traveled quite light, haven't you?" "Yeah, we've always rented fully furnished places, so we don't have any furniture. My room is still available, right?" "Yes, of course." "We'll be staying there for a few days starting today, so don't worry too much about meals and stuff." "That won't do. I'll make sure to prepare meals for us to share." "Thanks. I'm truly sorry for all the terrible things I've done, and for being welcomed back like this. I really am remorseful." My eldest son said this with a cheerful smile. At that time, I truly believed that Michael had changed and was living an honest life. However, it didn't take long living together to realize that I was mistaken. As days passed, the facade of Michael and Aurora started to peel away. After a few days of Michael living with us, Matthew and I were quickly becoming troubled by their behavior. They were selfish and overbearing. When the child cried, "Shut up!" Michael would snap harshly and become irritable. Can people really change so easily? "I can't relax with a kid around the house." Michael kept saying this, glaring at my grandchild. I was filled with unease. When we weren't looking, I couldn't help but worry if Michael might harm my grandchild. The same was true for Aurora. She's a young woman, only 24 years old. She prefers flashy clothes and makeup, often goes out late at night, and wears strong perfume. Moreover, Aurora frequently confronts Matthew's wife, Natalie, for some reason. "Natalie looks so plain, doesn't she? It's like she's given up on being a woman since having a kid." She made such a comment this morning, laughing at Natalie and earning her displeasure. I immediately regretted it. If only I hadn't been swayed back then, none of this would have happened. I apologized to Matthew and Natalie many times. They say it's not my fault, but I was crushed by guilt. Overwhelmed with worry, I secretly installed a lot of security cameras in the house without telling Michael and Aurora. This way, I can keep an eye on what happens to my grandchild when I'm not around. I was also discreetly keeping a closer watch on Aurora. Whenever she confronted Natalie, I would intervene immediately, taking on the unpleasant role of the meddling mother-in-law. I hoped that by doing so, any hostility towards Natalie would be redirected at me. However, Aurora wasn't fooled by my facade as a strict mother-in-law. Despite my facade, she obediently followed my instructions with polite replies and honest words. She's still a young woman, and perhaps sees me in the same light as her own mom. I realized they weren't going to change easily. Amidst these worries and feelings of guilt, the two suddenly announced they were going on a trip. A trip? But with no house settled? Are you sure about the finances?
The money for the honeymoon was saved separately from the house rental funds. We're thinking of going abroad for about 3 weeks.
What? Abroad? You've really saved up a lot.
Well, yeah.
I felt uneasy about the smug smile on my eldest son's face as he said this. Still, I decided to see them off, thinking it would be good if they left the house for a while. I vaguely recognized the banking card they briefly showed, but didn't pay much attention at the time. After arranging to call when they were about to return, I helped them with their travel preparations. A few days after the newlywed couple left for their honeymoon, I received an international call on my mobile phone. Assuming it was Michael and Aurora, I answered the phone. It was likely a call to inform me of their return date, which was approaching. A cheerful Michael started talking as soon as I answered. He shared where they went, what they did, and when they were planning to return. The thought of Michael and Aurora coming back and the house getting noisy again, making Matthew and his family bear with it, was somewhat depressing. However, I was relieved that they hadn't gotten into any trouble on their trip. "Did you have fun?" As I asked this, I could hear Michael and presumably Aurora's laughter. They must have had a great time, I thought, when Michael started with,
"Actually,"
he began by saying,
"I borrowed money from you, Mom."
I couldn't believe my ears. What did Michael just say? As I weakly responded, "What?" Michael and Aurora burst into laughter.
"Come on, we don't have that kind of money. We just happened to touch your drawer and found a banking card, and that's how we planned the honeymoon."
"Thank you, Penelope. It was such a fun trip thanks to you," they said, laughing crudely. I was speechless with shock. I couldn't believe they used my banking card for their overs. My thoughts stopped in shock. "How much did you spend?"
"Just $40K, but that's fine, right? There's still plenty of money left on the banking card."
Michael's voice was filled with laughter. I felt the blood drain from my body. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to the ground. Sensing my condition, Michael and Aurora began laughing again. What a terrible son! To deceive me and steal my money, not once, but twice, and spend it all. At that moment, I suddenly remembered something. Wait, that's odd. Did I even have that much money? It's been over a decade since Michael took all the savings, and since my husband passed away, I haven't been living a wealthy life. I had no spare savings. As I recalled the banking card Michael and Aurora had, "Oh!" I blurted out. Could it be that Michael and Aurora? If that's the case, it would be serious. "Return it immediately or else," I said in a panic, but Michael didn't seem to take me seriously. This is bad. Alarms were ringing in my head. "Did you check the account name?" Despite my pale face, I managed to squeeze out those words. Hearing this, Michael reacted with, "Huh?" in a dumbfounded voice. Could it be that they took it without even checking? I immediately told Michael to check the name on the banking card. Reluctantly, Michael seemed to be verifying as I instructed. The next moment, "Whoa!" he let out a panicked voice over the phone. "That's Matthew's, isn't it?" "What's going on here?" "Calm down." Ignoring my words, Michael was only panicking. Aurora, beside Michael, must have realized the truth and was also panicking. Her high-pitched voice rang out, and my mind switched to a state of calm. "I'll inform Matthew." As I said this, Michael pleaded in a frail voice. "Wait, please," he exclaimed in a feeble voice. Michael's desperation was due to the notoriously bad relationship between him and his brother Matthew. Michael had always been troublesome, while Matthew was diligent and a hard worker. Moreover, Matthew was sharp-witted and had never lost a verbal spar with Michael. Additionally, Matthew had a strong sense of justice. He didn't have the leniency to forgive his brother's foolish acts, and had always been in thorough opposition to him. "For now, come back immediately. If you don't, things will get even worse." As I emphasized this, Michael responded, "Understood. Mom, please help me." He clung to me with a pitiful voice. I had no intention of helping Michael, but I thought it was necessary to clarify things. That night, Michael and Aurora returned home in a hurry. They rushed into the living room where Matthew, Natalie, and I were sitting, their faces turning pale at the sight. "Michael, Aurora, sit down." When I said that, they obediently took their seats. Seeing them glance fearfully at Matthew and Natalie with downcast eyes, I felt a sense of pity for my own son. I had already explained the situation to Matthew. Matthew was furious upon hearing it, as I nervously watched what decision Matthew would make next. "Brother, did you use the child support money that Natalie and I had been saving?" Matthew's low voice made Michael. Well, he faltered and averted his eyes. Then Michael tried to excuse himself, saying he mistook it for my money. Matthew listened with his eyes downcast, and when he looked up again, his gaze was filled with contempt for Michael. It was a chilling look that even made me shiver. Michael, unable to meet Matthew's eyes, hung his head in shame and continued to make excuses. "Enough, brother! You're the worst!" Matthew shouted, raising his voice. Michael and Aurora jerked in surprise. "Are you stupid, brother? Not only did you come back here, cry to Mom, and live in her house, but you also betrayed her trust and tried to steal her money. How much more can you trample on Mom's feelings?" Michael, struck by the seriousness of these words, finally stopped making excuses and was left speechless. "We want our $40,000 back, and find a place to live, and leave immediately. We'll forgive you this time, but don't ever come near this house again." As Matthew said this, Michael's face fell in dismay. Then Aurora spoke up in a raised voice. "What's that supposed to mean? We're the bad ones? Trying to get money from Penelope was like a security deposit." We were all astonished by Aurora's outrageous claim. "I always have to listen to nagging about doing this and that. Natalie doesn't do anything useful, yet she gets all the favor." I was obediently listening, but I was really stressed out. That's why we wanted to go on the trip, to refresh. It's not all Penelope's fault. Apparently, Aurora had been accumulating stress, even though she seemed to be ignoring my nagging. "If getting forgiven for the 40K is cheap, then it's a small price to pay, right?" Aurora said arrogantly with a huff. We were all dumbfounded by her audacity. Amidst this, Natalie, who'd been listening intently to Aurora's rant, looked at her calmly and began to speak in an even tone. "That was something you did for my sake?" "Huh?" "Penelope was trying to stop you from confronting me all the time. She thought that if she could redirect some of your attention and hostility towards yourself, It would ease my burden as a mother." Despite hearing Natalie's words, Aurora remained steadfast in her assertive attitude. Challenging Natalie, she retorted, "So what if that's the case? It's your fault for getting confronted. Why are you so confrontational? Let's clear this up right here," Natalie said, prompting Aurora to scoff and glare at her. "It's obvious. The child is noisy. They cry day and night, touch everything. I found my favorite bag being used for their play pretend. Can you believe it? Do you know how much that costs?" Natalie sighed lightly at Aurora's claim. "What? Is what I'm saying wrong? Do you think it's okay for children to do anything because they're kids? It's your lack of discipline that's causing me trouble," Aurora ranted, leaning in towards Natalie with frustration. Indeed, allowing children to do anything just because they're young isn't good for their education. But Natalie's child was well-mannered and obedient, and Natalie had clearly informed Aurora that there might be some inconveniences due to her young child. So Natalie, perhaps thinking along similar lines, looked sharply at Aurora. "But that doesn't justify using our money for a lavish trip, does it?" Aurora flinched at Natalie's cold voice. "I am not your sister, nor am I just a stranger to Michael. My family is my husband, my child, and Penelope, so I am deeply upset that you used our money. I won't be as lenient as my husband. I intend to take legal action and seek appropriate measures." Aurora was outraged by Natalie's words. She raised her voice shrilly in protest, shaking the table. I tried to intervene, but Natalie firmly declared, "We're adults here, aren't we? Children can't get away with everything, and adults even less so. Throwing a tantrum won't get you anywhere." Aurora stopped in her tracks at these words. Michael didn't try to stop Aurora. He just looked pained and averted his eyes. It was hard to tell who was the older of the two. I was utterly dismayed by the true nature of my eldest son and his wife. In the end, as Natalie said, they were sued. The eldest son and his wife started claiming they wouldn't pay when it came down to it. They insisted there was no proof and tried to escape responsibility. That's when the security cameras I had installed came in handy. The footage clearly showed the couple holding Matthew's banking card and smirking. Seeing this, they finally gave in and agreed to all of Matthew's demands, leaving the house burdened with debt. Later, Matthew told me that Michael and Aurora were living together in a thin-walled apartment. They were working hard and slowly paying back the money. According to monthly reports, they were constantly arguing and might split up within the year. As the end of the year approached, just as Matthew had predicted, they broke up. Our families continued living together as before. My grandchild was growing up healthy and happily, having regained her carefree spirit now that Michael and his wife were gone. I was truly relieved to see my grandchild flourishing like that.